On the ground, as troops fight, bombs fall, and people flee from the terror, this looks very much like a war between Ukraine and Russian invaders. But something else is happening here too. For while Europe and the US have refused to fight militarily or impose a no-fly zone, they are already at economic war with Russia.
We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia.
These sanctions will suppress Russia's economic growth.
We will continue on a remorseless mission to squeeze Russia from the global economy piece by piece.
This is a financial battle, one that could change the very nature of the world economy. An invisible assault that goes further than anything we've ever seen before.
This is something we did not do in World War II with Germany.
That really is a new use of financial power that's quite unprecedented.
I'm definitely worried, yes.
It's worth just taking a step back and considering the scale and the speed of what we're talking about here in terms of sanctions from America and Europe. You've got financial sanctions on individuals, oligarchs, politicians. We've had them before, but they've gone even further. You've got the financial messaging network, SWIFT. Russia's been cut off from it. It makes it even more difficult to get money in and out. And then you've got trade, new tariffs on goods coming out of Russia. Effectively, it is a pariah in the global trading system. And all of this has happened very quickly, because when it comes to economic war, speed matters.
This was an attempt by Europe and the United States to tilt the battlefield in Ukraine's favour. And I still think, to a degree, that is the way in which we're thinking about these measures, is a sort of siege against Russia, a counter-siege of an economic, financial, trade, tech variety, to try and alter the outcome in military terms of a struggle which is not resolved.
And the list of measures go on. We've seen companies going beyond the rules, pulling out of Russia even when they don't need to, like McDonald's and Visa and Mercedes. There's a ban on selling any product to Russia with American technology in it, which means it's essentially cut off from the most advanced computer tech. And then there's the final punishment, perhaps the biggest, which comes down to what many in Russia saw as their financial trump card: reserves. Reserves are essentially a pile of money or gold that countries set aside as an insurance policy, and Russia has an awful lot of them. It's supposed to buy you time in the event of a financial crisis, but here's the thing. A lot of those reserves are not in Moscow, but actually in European countries, in Paris and in Frankfurt and in London. And when these financial sanctions were imposed, Europe and the US said, no, you don't. We're going to cut you off.
I don't think that anyone has frozen central bank reserves in the way that Western countries have with Russia's reserves. And so that really is a new use of financial power that's quite unprecedented.
The upshot in the following days, a collapse in the Russian currency, the ruble. It's unclear whether Russia will be able to pay any of its foreign currency debt in the coming months. Not because it doesn't have the money, because it's not allowed to use the money. A default, but not as we know it. That brings us to the impact, and in short, it could be very bad. For Russia, a cataclysmic recession, perhaps even worse than in Ukraine, raising the question, was that the plan? If this is economic war, what constitutes victory?
The battle could be, we want to weaken the Russian economy to the point that it's either unable to be a danger or keep making sure that it's unable to perform these actions again in the future. So there is indeed a war logic being applied.
The impact elsewhere around the world will also be severe. We could see a food crisis, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, which is enormously reliant on Russian and Ukrainian wheat.
Russia and Ukraine altogether account for about 30% of wheat export, as you know, fertilizers as well. So cutting this production off for a number of countries will have two impacts. One is that we are seeing global prices rising. And the other one is that some of this wheat, some countries really needed it badly.
And then there's energy. Russia has the world's biggest reserves of natural gas. Europe massively reliant on it. And you might have thought that would have gone down since the invasion, but have a look at this. Actually, since the invasion, flows of natural gas from Russia to Europe have gone up to the highest level so far this year. In other words, even as Europe imposes sanctions on Russia, it is also funneling billions of euros of cash across to Russia to finance energy.
If you're involved in a long, protracted siege of Russia, you have to pace yourself. I mean, this is the position of the German government, right? We precisely because we're serious about this, we need to move in a deliberate fashion.
In other words, there is realpolitik, pragmatism going on here, even amid the economic war. But for Germany and the rest, this conflict is likely to do something else: redraw the map. For decades, Germany practiced Ostpolitik, trying to draw Russia closer to Europe through economic and energy ties. But now, in the face of economic war, does Russia lean to the east, towards India, towards China, and do Western nations redouble their alliance? And does all of that constitute a new Cold War?
I do think the world is going to be different, because I think that the degree of risk that people have recognized, strategic risk that exists in the world, is not going to go away, even if in the short run the Russians are forced to back down. And that has a lot of consequences for the way we regard globalized trade and our dependence on other countries.
In other words, this may only be the start of a bigger economic war with bigger consequences. Globalization, the way the world fits together, has long been at a crossroads. Is this the moment it heads down a different path altogether?